A much-anticipated truce deal between Israel and Hamas is now expected to begin tomorrow morning. Qatari mediators say a pause in fighting will come into force at 7 a.m. Israeli time in both the north and the south of the Gaza Strip. 13 hostages are then expected to be released later in the afternoon. They are all women and children. Meanwhile, Lord Cameron's in Israel on his first trip there as Foreign Secretary. He's been visiting Kibbutz Be'eri, the scene of one of the worst Hamas attacks on October the 7th.
I wanted to come here myself to see the horrific nature of the attacks that you suffered on October the 7th, and they are absolutely horrific. I mean, the terrorism, parents shot in front of their children, children shot in front of their parents. I've heard things and seen things that obviously I will never forget, and it's important we understand that.
And earlier this afternoon, the Israeli military confirmed it has detained the director of Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital for questioning. This is over evidence that the facility had been used as a command centre for Hamas. Let's go to Jerusalem now, where we can speak to journalist Noga Tarnopolsky. Hi, Noga. Thank you for joining us again. What can you tell us now about this? We're not calling it a ceasefire, are we? We're calling it a pause in hostilities. But why has it not happened today when we were thinking that it would?
We don't fully know, Vanessa. There are a number of technical details that may have gotten in the way. One of them seems to be the fact that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised Israelis that the Red Cross would be allowed to visit the remaining hostages. Remember, tomorrow 13 will be released, and it's projected that a total of 50 will be released, but there are 240 Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Anyway, that fact, the visits from the Red Cross, is not announced in the Qatari announcement or in the Hamas announcement, but the Israeli government still maintains it is written in the kind of the treaty with the United States. So it's unclear what will happen. The Red Cross has not confirmed that it will be visiting any hostages. It simply says that it will receive the first 13 to be released tomorrow at the Egyptian border.
And do we have any idea which of the hostages will be released tomorrow?
Well, kind of. There was this horrible, horrible lottery. I don't know how else to call it, this afternoon in Israel, in which after receiving the list with the names, these are people chosen entirely by Hamas. Israel had nothing to do with it. The list was transmitted to the Qatari mediators. They handed it to the director of the Israeli Mossad, who is in Qatar. And those 13 families received phone calls not that long, around 2 hours ago, informing them that their relatives' names are on the list. The remaining families just sat there and waited. And incredibly, I have to say, this scenario is going to be repeated at least for the next 4 days, with all the families and the whole country, to be honest, sitting, waiting on tenterhooks to see who is called and who is not.
This really is agonizing. I mean, if anybody tries to put themselves in the place of the families anxiously awaiting news of and the sight of and some kind of connection with their beloved relatives who were taken away on the 7th of October so long ago, and you're waiting and waiting for the phone call and you don't get the phone call because it's not your relative. Oh my God, it's absolutely agonizing. Are the families all in one place, or are they all in their own homes in different places in Israel? What I mean is, do they know that the phone has rung in some other family's house but not in their house? Do they know that?
They do.
Oh,
they
God.
do. And most of them have kind of shut down over the last 24 hours. But a few are still speaking to journalists with whom they've become friendly over these past weeks. And they really are describing what I can only call a form of torture. Yeah. You know, the Qataris announced today that the hostages to be released tomorrow will only be women and children. And I heard an interview with one man whose 84-year-old mom is being held hostage, and who said, you know, of course I'm happy anyone's being released, but I worry for my mother. And he said every further day in Gaza is like a death sentence for her.
Well, I had Noam Sagi right here in the studio, Noga, and he said my mother should have been here in London with me celebrating her 75th birthday. She was fluent in Arabic. She worked with children on the West Bank. She's the most amazing woman, the daughter of Holocaust survivors. And he said that all that was left in her house on the kibbutz when she was taken was blood. And he hasn't heard of her or seen her since. So obviously everybody waiting and watching in such a state of incredible trauma, waiting to see what will happen. So we're told that the fighting will stop tomorrow morning at 7 Israeli time. We're told that the hostages, 13 of them, women and children, will come home sometime tomorrow. That's all we know. Do we know where they'll be delivered or how they'll be delivered or whether the families will be there waiting as they come across the border? What do we know?
The families will not be waiting as they come across the border. There will be Hebrew-speaking representatives of the Red Cross, as I understand. They will be brought by representatives of Hamas, by Hamas officials, to the Rafah border with Egypt, where they will be greeted by these Red Cross officials. And then, as I understand it, they will be put on helicopters and they will be rushed to hospitals in Israel that are already awaiting them. There was a kind of very gruesome discussion today, public discussion in Israel, among experts in hostage matters, trying to help these hospitals prepare. How do you greet a baby?
Oh, God.
You know, a baby who's just been released from captivity, and more so babies and toddlers who have lost their parents. They're trying to invent a procedure to handle this tomorrow. I don't expect we'll see any of them actually going home tomorrow. I expect they will all spend at least one night in the various hospitals that are waiting for them.
And nobody knows if they've been kept underground in tunnels. Nobody knows how they've been fed. Nobody knows if they've had medical treatment. Nobody knows whether how people have behaved to them. Nobody knows anything at all, just nothing, do they?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Wow. And we heard more information just earlier about what's going on. Are there any other developments that you can tell us about, Noga, that have happened today?
There has been a lot of, I would say, misbehavior on the part of ministers of the Israeli government. So some are members of his coalition. Some are calling to reoccupy Gaza. There has been today a former leader of the Mossad, who's an expert in hostage matters, really slammed the Israeli prime minister for boasting last night at his press conference that he had ordered the Mossad to kill Hamas leaders. And he said it was a stupidity to provoke Hamas in such a way just hours before an expected deal. So I would say that there's growing friction within Israeli society about how these things should be handled, what should be said, what should not be said. And none of the ministers who have said outrageous things, and some are very outrageous, or some may even be endangering this deal, none of them have been reprimanded in any way. The government seems to have gone into its own bunker since the press conference last night.
Thank you very much indeed for reporting so faithfully for us, and we look forward to speaking to you again